Divine rising, divine rise, divine rise, divine rise, divine rise, gods and goddesses. Divine rise, gods and goddesses, titans, adepts, celestials, magi's, brujas, occultists, alchemists, neophytes, adepts and initiates. Welcome to a very important piece. A very important piece. I'm gonna start with the singing bowl that y'all harmonize the energy here while we in this space. And then we're gonna get into this build. Just a little sound therapy, especially after leaving the gym. Critical, I titled, this is the thought that came through. Critical Ascension, or critical altitude, the sacrifices for our soul's ascension, ascending into our higher purpose, higher into our higher space. Before we get into that, God Hour podcast. This week's episode was an excellent build on the wounded illusion, getting into the aspects of the wounded feminine, real deep into the aspects of the wounded feminine, how to identify them, and identifying the wounded masculine energies, the archetypes that are within us. Had a very special guest host, Celestial Magi Nagasi Wholeness. Her information is up. The podcast is streaming now, live everywhere, Spotify, iTunes, and Breaker. So go ahead and check that out. Wounded Illusion. Very powerful build on that. And it led me to this aspect of, can you allow, as we're shedding the old aspects of ourselves, one of the biggest ways to shed the old aspects of ourselves is through the deification process, deifying yourself. Being able to, can you sit in a position, this is how you can tell how much healing and what's triggering you. Can you sit in a position and allow one to take shots at your personality or your identity? I'm talking about from the deepest depths of their heart, give you this description based on their perception to put your ego to rest in that space. When we're thinking about this critical altitude of us coming into our balance, when we're thinking about that critical altitude of you just right above that line of starting your healing process, or you're in your healing process, or you're in your ascension, you're coming into your enlightenment, one of the biggest things when it comes into that healing process is sacrifice. Can you sacrifice the identity that you have become comfortable with, the identity that has made you you? Can you become comfortable with sitting in a space and not only being able to say it to yourself, the things that you are doing away with, but allowing others to say things to you? This is a big aspect of self-awareness. To say things to you based on their perception of the personality or the illusion of the personality that you created within that space. Can you sit there in a space with yourself and allow that to happen? That's your sacrifice. Can you deal with, when it comes to you going into this critical altitude, you're going to have others not understand you. You're going to have others have these disagreements with you. They're going to go, instead of doing the 4 agreements, they're going to do the 4 disagreements. They're going to disagree with you. If it's, let it happen. As you're rising into your soul's purpose, as you're coming into yourself, as you're coming online, the things that are going to come at you are going to be the reflections of your fears and reflections of your worst critic. They're going to become the reflections of your worst critic, that critique, that broken aspect of you. That's the sacrifice. Keep going. When you're sitting in this space to yourself in your meditation and you're allowing yourself to clearing your mind, and that's letting the noise in. You're sacrificing those personalities. This is one of the major keys when it comes into you actually coming into this balance, coming into this androgynous state. It's one thing to say that you're a god. It's one thing to say that you're a goddess, however you want to put yourself. It's one thing to say this, but it's a whole nother process. Because once you state that you're a god, once you state that you're a goddess, you are an androgynous, unified being. Once you make this claim, the process of unifying you starts to happen. The process of you becoming unified starts to happen. This space that you're coming into, that's that sacrifice. That's you having these conversations based upon learning to listen, to respond, as I'm always speaking on, learning how to listen to respond. That means you can sit there, you can take in the information, the way that you're responding is your energy is responding for you. Your energy is making the filter for you to be within that space to take in the information that you need to take in. This is the most honest and open dialogue that you will have with yourself. Because once you start having this dialogue with yourself in the ascending and bringing yourself to that rising, as you're setting that tone and you're having that conversation with yourself, everything in your physical reality is going to change to match that conversation you have with yourself. We're going from unconscious to consciously doing it. You've done it unconsciously for years. You've done the negative self-talk. You've had the conversation with yourself, and you were like, well, maybe he did this, or maybe she did this, or maybe this happened, or maybe this happened. It's all based on the narrative that you created for that to exist. These old narratives of your old self, they no longer can work at this altitude. That's why it gets really, really shaky when you're saying what you're saying and you're moving in that thought process and you're having these reactions because you're reacting to the climate. Your old personalities, these old thoughts, they're reacting to the climate. They're not getting the same sun. They're not getting the same light that they used to get. They're not getting the same nurturing. And you're going to start noticing this when you're coming into your ascension. Yesterday was the lunar eclipse for Gemini. I think I made a post in a couple spaces, but it was the aspect of submission. One of the biggest things is that aspect of like you're submitting to the attributes of that space. So if I'm inside of a space and the ancestors are leading me to, you need to work on this aspect of the wounded feminine aspects of yourself. Just in speaking to myself. That means I need to submit to the attributes of that ideal space of where I'm going to be getting this lesson. That means I'm sacrificing my humanity. I'm sacrificing my control. I'm sacrificing the victimhood. I'm sacrificing the struggle narrative, and I'm going to sit here and I'm about to do this. I'm about to get this work. I'm going to allow this sacrifice to happen. You can tell when your sacrifice is accepted because it's going to be, at first, it's going to be the most mind-rocking, body-rocking, brutally honest moment in your life. But you can tell when the sacrifice is accepted, and you can tell when it's been received. You're receiving. That's a receptive aspect. because it depends on your reflection of how you receive it. This is how you understand if your sacrifice has been accepted in that space. When I say accepted, I'm not speaking from this tune when people are like, well, I wanted this. No. When I'm talking about acceptance, it's what happens within that space. Everything that's happening within that space, it should be growing and nurturing me as much, even if it's to a degree where I feel like I didn't grow and nurture. You have to come into that balance of understanding you are being nurtured in that space. Something, the trigger that happened, the trigger of that betrayal, the trigger that happened in that relationship, friendship, that job, whatever it may be, that trigger that keep getting pressed. The reason that you keep going into this state of repeating yourself, the reason you keep going into this state of repeating yourself is because how are you looking at it? This is self-awareness. How are you looking at it? You get to a point, this is what happens when we get to a volatile point in our energy and we're holding what is to be sacrificed. You're sitting there, you're holding on to the anger, you're holding on to the thought, you're holding on to the action, you're holding on to it. You standing right there in front of the volcano, you standing right there in front of the fire pit, and you just holding it over it, afraid to drop it. That sacrifice, this is where we get out of this aspect of good and bad and we get into positive and negative. That trauma, that idea in your mind, that conduit, that narrative that you created in your mind for how you existed, it served you a purpose, no matter how negative, what the negative rooting of it came from, no matter what wounded aspect that it came from. That's what you have to sacrifice, because that's what you're going to have to sacrifice, because that's a part of your humanity. That's a part of the human aspect of you that you have to get rid of. When we think about the aspects of our human self, in the good parts, I'm talking about like the good parts that feed the soul, those aren't human aspects. Those are not human. Those are actually not human aspects. Those are higher self aspects. When you think about, put it like this, when you think about sex, and that feeling that you're going for, that feeling, that release that you go for in that space, that's not a human aspect. That's the aspect of the higher. That's the aspect of your bonding of your feminine and your masculine. That's a higher aspect. That's why when you try to go achieve it, you try to achieve it, but until you realize this, you're only going to be making a sacrifice to get that achievement in the space where you're at. That's not going to help you ascend. A lot of us get used to, I got used to that shit. That was one of the biggest things in my healing. I was used to going through a certain point of myself, such as the traumas with my mother, traumas with my pops, traumas with uncles, aunts, family members. I remember one of the things, because this is another thing, got deep into it in this week's episode, but you sitting there in your space, and who is the first person that wounded you? That's the biggest admittance. It was a parental figure. A figure that was in that parental role. So when you look at that space, if your mother hurt you, if your pops hurt you, if your uncle that was a father figure, aunt, whatever figure took that role, hurt you, when you're moving into the space now, you're going to have a longing for the energy that you didn't get then. You're going to have a longing for the energy you didn't get then. So you're going to sacrifice what is aspects of you reaching to your higher self in order to keep getting what you've been getting. You're going to keep So when I'm talking about that aspect of sacrifice, when you make your sacrifice, a true sacrifice is of things that you, in your mind at that point in time, that you cannot get rid of. That you feel like you cannot get rid of. If you need that example, go watch The Last Airbender with Aang. Can you sit there in that space with yourself and close your eyes and sit there in that meditation and imagine yourself, everything that you felt that you loved based on needing and wanting, that it was there? Can you see yourself losing it by being bluntly honest to yourself? That's work in itself, and that's one of the things that I do as a as the co-psychologist and a healer. That's what needs to be exposed. Can I sit in my space? For example, I'm gonna go back. Can I go into my space and the love or whatever my mother was to me that I define my mother to me as, can I let go of that aspect? What my father was, can I let go of that aspect into learning how to parent myself? Can I learn to parent myself? Can I learn to cultivate myself? Can I learn to be my own brotherhood? Can I learn to be that sisterhood to myself? Can I learn to be, this is the truest aspect of sacrificing to become alone. This is the truest aspect of sacrificing and truly to become alone. Shit warms up, this shit is, all this right here is going to burn, ache. Like right now my chest is mad tight, I just left the gym. But like all this get warm. Because your energy starts to rise. You're starting to cultivate your energy in your space. You stop looking for escapes and you start creating releases. One of my releases is going to the gym. After I've done after I've done the sacrificing aspects, the stuff that I don't need anymore, don't want anymore, need not, want not. Now you create create your releases and charges. One of my greatest releases and charges is heading to the gym at 5, but I'm up. I didn't even go to sleep because of the lunar eclipse last night. But like 5:30 in the morning, in that rise, I'm up. I'm at the gym. At the gym, sitting there doing my workout. That's my charge and release. Everything that I program into that space to start my day off is breaking me down as I'm learning to charge myself. So everything that I build goes into that space. That's a moment of an hour to an hour. That's about an hour, 45 minutes of sacrifice. But it's for a result. When you're making your sacrifices, is it a result for you to ascend, or is it to simply keep you where you at? Be honest with yourself. When you're when you're having those thought processes and you're looking through the old narratives, be honest with yourself for self-realization. See where you're at. Go back to what originally hurt you. Go back to the first wounds. Go back to the first space of the first wounds. Have that conversation with yourself. I want you to be fucking great. I want you to be the fucking best. When it comes to that aspect of that sacrifice, when you really start to sacrifice into your soul purpose, when you really start to work into your soul and doing that aspect, even as you're going through it, going into that critical altitude point, everything that's going to be shown to you is going to be the reflection of the deepest rooted fear, the deepest rooted, because it's an ongoing process with your shadow work and you working on yourself. The deepest rooted shit that's in the bottom of the bottom of the aspects of you. That's what's going to start coming to the surface. Once you have integrated and brought your soul together into that balance, now you have to seal that shit. Now you're sealing that shit together. When you go into this true sacrifice aspect, this is when Bobby Hemming was talking about you going to damn lose everything in your ascension. You coming into your balance is you dying before you die. Enlightenment is just like death. So why are there not a lot of people that are enlightened? Because a lot of people are afraid to die. These are those aspects. How much, this becomes a simple question. If right now, for example, they shut the whole world down and you didn't go grocery shopping. You didn't go get no water. You didn't get no bread. And they said everybody in the house. And you didn't go get shit. And now they got you on 14-hour lockdown where they turn the power off for 14 hours and they give you like 6 hours of power. So now you can't do the same things that you had to do with, okay, cool, I'm going to watch my television or I'm going to do this. They cut your power. You ain't got no Wi-Fi. That's the mindset of when you're thinking about sacrifice. When you're looking at the environment and the playing ground the way it is now, that is the environment. When you're deifying yourself and you're deifying your environment, you're creating these wastelands that are going into the aspects of things that you need, the aspects of yourself that you're shedding. This is the perfect environment for you to deify it with. Look at yourself into that space. You can look at it from that projection of like, what if I didn't do this, or I didn't have this, or this wasn't here, or this wasn't here? What would I be doing? That's how you know when you're really into your soul's purpose. Because I know that regardless of where I'm at right now, me being in my soul purpose, I know that I am willing, and this is one of the strongest things, to bring that balance of love to yourself so you can start reflecting that love and reciprocating that love in spaces. I know that at the end of the day, I've been saying it since the beginning of Ascensions and coming into a space. I know that to myself, I can say in full that if everything around me had to burn away in order for me to come into balance, knowing that with the possibility of it not coming back, I'm willing to do that for my soul purpose. Until you're willing to accept that to yourself, that type of investment, that type of sacrifice to yourself, that healing process is going to be in vain. You stepping into that space is being in vain. Because this is not something that requires bits and pieces of you. This is something that requires all of you. This is the true aspect of you loving, bringing that love to you. This is the truest aspect of you bringing. I'm in love with myself. I can set these boundaries for myself. I can be alone with myself. I can laugh with myself. I can, at any situation that I'm in, I'm being the most honest aspect of me. In every position that I'm in, and it's that working progress. It's the same personality, the same whole, it's the same mentality, whatever the conversation is. The only thing that has changed is that my personality, I'm now able to have a moment of that self-awareness when I'm looking at others, looking at me and telling me things through their perception of me, and I'm able to sit there and respond. I'm able to sit there and respond in the aspect of allowing my energy to do what it needs to do. To allow myself to sit back and be like, you know what? Yeah, I needed that to kill those aspects of myself. That's why it came up. I needed that to take that out. That's why it came up. And then I'm able to come back later. And actually, that's the divine masculine aspect. But I want you to be the best. I want you to be great. I want you to ascend. I want you to go through that critical altitude and allow that sacrifice to happen. For a lot of us, that sacrifice is going to look like the things that you have put into your life that mean the most to you in that aspect of maintaining your illusion for yourself. Those are going to be the things that you have to sacrifice. And there's a reason that you have to sacrifice it. But before we get into that, the God Hour podcast, this week's episode, Wounded Illusion, very powerful build, featuring the Celestial Magi. All the information's in there. Got into the aspects of the wounded feminine. Tonight, God Hour show. We do 7 p.m. Tonight, I'm going to do a build on the meeting the divine masculine and what it means and what it is of that aspect, meeting the divine masculine, where it's like it's not argumentative, it's balanced, it's receiving, it's equal receiving and receiving. We're gonna get deep into that tonight. Readings, 1 card 222, 3 cards 777, And regular 5 card reading is $15.15. That's only for the God Hour show. 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Facebook Live. See y'all there. Come get that reading. Share this video. And share this video. In my description, in my page, is everything about the podcast. Tune into the podcast. Share, like, be the best. Incidental services from the readings to setting up a consultation for starting to get that work in that healing process for you. Hit me in my inbox or at GODalchemistLLC.com. Everything from the readings to the shadow work and the consultation. Shadow work reading with the consultation, all the way to spiritual baths, and to spiritual baths to drawing rituals and all types of other good stuff. I want you to be the best. Allow yourself to what would you sacrifice to be great? Remember, I trust is greater. I'm about to put that on a shirt, I swear. I trust is always going to be greater than you hope. I trust is that process of acceptance. I hope is the process of expectancy. What side of the Pac-Man mouth, the sign are you on? I want you to be the best. I love you. We love us. Ashe.